everyone, and welcome to the Veterinary Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for developing a successful veterinary practice and career. I'm Dr. Peter Weinstein, one of the co-hosts of the Veterinary Business Podcast. On this podcast, we bring you insights and expertise from industry-leading doctors, experts, and thought leaders. We cover a wide range of topics, including practice management, marketing strategies, leadership development, human resource best practices, and so much more. So whether you're a practicing veterinarian or a veterinarian who actually knows what they're doing, a practice owner, a practice manager, or a student studying to be a veterinarian, this podcast is tailored to help you navigate the absolutely unique challenges and opportunities in the business of veterinary medicine. Each and every listener of this podcast is welcome to visit the website at www.veterinarybusinessinstitute.com for additional resources and tools to support your growth. And remember, you can subscribe to our podcast on any of the major podcast platforms such as iTunes, Spotify, etc. Now, you've heard many podcasts from me. Today, I'm particularly excited to welcome Ryan Janas, Veterinary Operations Director for VetPro Central, a veterinary-specific recruiter. But we're not going to talk about that at the beginning because Ryan's background is quite unique, to the point that we have entitled this podcast, What Veterinary Medicine Can Learn from Amazon. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weinstein. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's get to know you a little bit. I would fathom a guess that the vast majority of our listeners don't know you. And from our conversation previously, you're relatively new to veterinary medicine, coming from a really large corporate background. So can you start by telling us a little bit of your backstory that got you to where you are today in getting on your road to veterinary medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Weinstein. So it's definitely been a windy road to vet med. I started with a massive passion in automotive, and that brought me to be an automotive technician for 7 years as kind of a first career. And from there, I found that working with customers was really a strong point for me and really fulfilling, being able to educate people about something that they didn't know. And that brought me to Bridgestone, where I ran stores for Firestone Complete Auto Care and became a regional trainer for them, for their leadership teams and technical teams, and then an area manager where I had 13 stores in the Dallas market, working directly with those automotive establishments and working with those leaders on business acumen, hiring, HR concerns, the lot, right? The whole P&L and more. From there, I had an opportunity to join Amazon. I was excited to do so, like so many are. And while working through earning my MBA, I joined Amazon as an operations manager and was later promoted to senior operations manager, where I worked for them in England, Northern California, and Texas. There, I found real passion in working with diverse teams. And that was very unique to me, just being able to work with this vast team and learn processes and learn how we can do things that work with people across continents and really find good success there. I was recognized as a bar raiser for Amazon and did hundreds and hundreds of interviews for them, and really found a lot of joy in doing that as well. So working with these people, understanding new processes, and all of that was a really good time. But I wanted to bring my skills back to what felt like where I could really help. And I've been a pet owner my whole life. I really value the human animal bond, and it's been a big deal for me. And knowing that vet med and hearing about the growth in vet med through COVID and hearing people's stories from work from home and people that have never had pets, learning about the human animal bond, and all of that brought me interested in vet med. And when I found VetPro Central and learned more about what a huge opportunity we have to get more doctors in more practices and what a need we have for more veterinarians practicing, that's what kind of inspired me to head this way.
So I have to ask you a question that's very personal. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but I think you will. Tell me about your pets. What's your most recent four-legged, two-winged, slithering family members? Or if you don't have any at the moment, tell me about one or two pets that you remember most growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. So having moved back from England only about 8 months ago, I don't have a pet right now. And reading about what it takes to get a pet to and from and all of that didn't really make me feel warm and fuzzy about a family member, a loved one going through, wild processes and hanging in the belly of a plane for 20 hours and things like that. So I'll speak about a pet I had that's near and dear to my heart, like all of them. It was a rescue German short hair pointer that I had in Texas. And I got him when he was about a year old. He had escaped, or they had thought that he had escaped like a hunting school, and was just kind of roaming the forest or what have you. They found him in the streets, and he was super underweight. Got him back up to health. Got him a regular veterinary office where I saw a doctor that was uh, hugely passionate about German short hair pointers as well. And I ended up getting that dog from a sports rescue kind of organization. So really cool being able to kind of connect there and learn all the funny things. And I guess his name was Riley. So Riley smiled, and I didn't know anything about dogs smiling. I had never had a dog that had done this in the past. So when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this dog's been through a lot, and it likes to snarl often. So I was worried about it, and I had concerns, and people don't want to approach when the dog, raises its and bares its teeth like that. So I had to learn more about that and really come to love it. And now anytime I see a dog that has like a smile or anything like that, it really kind of warms my heart. I think it's some of the little things that we have with our pets are really cool.
So Smiley Riley was one of your pets growing up, and so you were a consumer of veterinary services before you came back into the field now. So you had no clue as a pet owner with Riley what the other side of the veterinary profession looked like as you do now. I'm going to ask you to think back to being a pet owner and a consumer of veterinary services and tell me a little bit about what your impression was. And obviously you're going to probably use some of the experiences that you've gained over the years, but what were your impressions of veterinarians and veterinary care when you were taking Riley and having the veterinary experiences at that point?
Yeah, so great question and happy to talk about that. Thank you. So I've had a varied experience, no doubt. And with that sports group, that rescue group that I was able to get Riley from, they had a lot of, there was fees and things like that to ensure that shots were done or tests were done and things like this. I'm not going to know them obviously like you, but we paid into that. And then there was suggestions for where to go to keep up on these things. And I tried my hand at a few veterinarians with Riley, to be honest with you. And I guess my experience where I didn't like it, starting there, was where it felt like me and Riley were another number there. It was very hustle bustle. It was very much what in automotive, there's a jargon term like a rubber stamp. Like, here's a rescue puppy that comes in. Here's what we do. Do this, this, and this, and everything will be set. And see you later. We'd like $800 or whatever it is, right? It just kind of goes through. And Where I've had really nice experiences is with, granted, smaller practices, a couple doctors, like I told you about the one that was just really specialized or really just gung-ho or passionate about, I don't know about specialized in, but in German short hair pointers, and had that personal connection, knew kind of the idiosyncrasies that that breed will do, and still had full conversations and things like that. And to be honest with you, if I remember right, I paid a little bit more to go to that practice, but I frequently saw that same doctor. I frequently saw the same people in the front, and I felt welcome. I felt like I was a part, like I was a cared for customer. So those are kind of two experiences that I've had when hunting in new locations for a new veterinarian.
Okay, we'll get back to your veterinary experiences in just a minute because I want to touch on Bridgestone and Amazon, and especially since they're kind of a corporate world, and sometimes employees get lost. It sounds with Bridgestone especially that you grew tremendously from kind of a technician into an area manager. I have to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that part of that process gave you a lot of new skills, knowledge, and attributes, and some of that is just hands-on work experience, getting down, getting dirty. And we'll start with Bridgestone. How much time does Bridgestone spend training and engaging new hires to prepare them to be successful?
I would say a good amount, bordering on a lot.
Okay.
Whether it be through, well, and in there, and as I spoke about with my road, I'm fairly passionate about this because I was a regional education partner for Bridgestone for 2 years, so I know the process that we went through well, and I was responsible, at least in part, for how that looked. So bringing new people in, taking them through week-long, off-site trainings where we, do various engagement, various role playing, various education, and have different educators in there to kind of add some variance, as well as some team building, where it makes sense, and games and things like that to kind of keep the team engaged. And then that is sustained by some more short classes throughout a year as a person grows with the organization, and then also a plethora, bordering on unlimited amount of e-training and different e-courses that can be done, whether it's presented and brought by the organization or even by another vendor, such as LinkedIn or what have you, all these other vendors of various trainings that you can kind of open up to. So at both organizations, to be honest with you, I would say it's quite significant.
So do you think that the training that they provided is something that veterinarians and veterinary practices could benefit from replicating in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that it's interesting where we have such a talented workforce in veterinary doctors and technicians and CVPMs and all of this, and really in medicine, as I've just learned, and kind of as logically makes sense to me, there's a lot of process. There's a process to be followed, and you kind of need to stick to it. There might be some variances, sure, here and there, but by and large, you need to stick to it. And when I hear from candidates and when I see how practices operate and I go visit and things like this, or I talk with people at various conferences, veterinary conferences I've been to, I find that there's a lot of concern about how much variance there is in the process of bringing people in. What does mentorship look like? When I speak with student candidates, mentorship has got to be one of the hottest button things right now. And asking some practices about what mentorship looks like can be a big varied answer from, yeah, we have a really good mentorship program, to, oh yeah, let me show you, here's this portion of our website, this is what we'll take them through, very thought out and very well laid out processes. So I see a lot of variance there, And I definitely think we have some opportunity to do better.
So just one more question on Bridgestone, and then I want to get to the, well, for lack of a better term, the elephant in the room. But you said you oversaw and you were an area manager for 13 stores.
Correct.
Do you think that if I were to pick you up as an area manager for Bridgestone, that you could then quite easily step in and be an area manager for 13 veterinary hospitals?
I don't think it would be near easy would not be the word, that's for sure. Having so much experience in automotive served me so well. And in speaking with veterinarians and speaking with um, candidates for hospital administrators, even area directorships, area medical directors, uh, Dr. Weinstein, there's a lot of concern from people in vet med that are bringing in people that aren't from vet med. If I said that clearly enough, so that lack of previous experience can really put you behind the eight ball. Does that mean that it can't be done? Absolutely not. We have great example. There's Olympic stories of swimming coaches that can't swim, right? I mean, there's all this. There is opportunity there, but would it be easy? I would say not. I think lots of observation would be required first, lots of learning.
You figured out exactly why I asked the question, from that standpoint, is that you can't always put a square peg in a round hole. By the way, you mentioned swimming. Were you a swimmer?
Uh, I'm I'm a Ironman triathlete, so I still swim quite a bit. Yeah, I've done a lot of swimming.
Okay, now let's talk about Amazon. Ironically, as I'm talking to you, I get a text on my phone that says, "Now arriving today, your Amazon package." If you read the story of Amazon and how it started with books to where it is today, it's a great story. And Amazon would like to take over the world. We're not going to talk about Jeff Bezos and his personality and everything else. I really want to talk about Amazon and what you learned there. What is the role of an operations manager when it comes to Amazon?
So, an operations manager at Amazon will manage anywhere from, let's say, 2 to 6 or 7 area managers who will, and this is speaking about my experience and all of that. So I just want to be clear there. And what I dealt with customer fulfillment side. Amazon's obviously a massive machine, so where that happens with other parts of the org, I can't speak to. But these area managers will then manage team leads, and those team leads will ensure that associates on the floor, and then obviously any robotic equipment and all safety adherences are done there on the operations floor. And the operations manager is the last line of, or the highest line of leadership that's still constantly on the operation floor. So making sure that processes are taking place, first and foremost, making sure that everyone's safe, and then working on the longer strategic stuff of how do we grow people into new positions, what is someone interested in for growth in the future, where might we be able to bring continuous improvement or process improvement to the business in this realm. So a bit long-winded there, I know, but hopefully.
So how many people were in your downward pipeline? I mean, if you look at yourself as an operations manager who had all of these regional managers, who had all of these people below them, how many people really were underneath you in an org chart?
So when I was promoted to senior operations manager, and for the bulk of that, I was in England, but it's similar to the U.S. Obviously, the same idea was brought over. I had about 1,200, which would include 70 or so, or maybe 75 salaried leaders, as it kind of rolls up.
Wow, 1,200. And many managers in veterinary hospitals have 12. Okay. That's I wanted that point to come across because of the significance of a lot of what you said. What you said is your role as an operations manager is to make everybody in your pipeline more successful and give them the tools and the opportunities to grow, to contribute, and to grow up within that pipeline. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I heard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a message there, isn't there, when you come to managing any business, whether it's 3 people, 1,200 people, or 120,000 people. As a leader, your job is to make the people that you work collaboratively with, your job is to make them more successful. And by doing so, you make yourself successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's hard for me to envision the whole Amazon org chart. You've mentioned the term processes a number of different times. Now, we don't know each other all that well, but I'm a big proponent of systems, processes, and checklists. I write about it, I speak about it, wrote a book on it. So I'm a big advocate for it. So I'm a big cheerleader on systems, processes, and checklists. Correct me wrong if I'm wrong again. There is no way Amazon could be delivering products in 4 hours or 12 hours or even 36 or 48 hours without the correct systems, processes, and checklists to ensure that the right product gets to the right place within that time frame. So how much detail was spent in the processes and the systems at, well, both Bridgestone and Amazon that you've been able to learn, assimilate, and understand?
Yeah, thank you. So the process focus, in my experience at Amazon, is extremely strong and really tight. When you speak about the time, it kind of just reminds me of how tight we would have to stay to tolerances to ensure that packages are gonna and people's items are gonna get to them in the time expected. And being able to be fast enough in a fulfillment center also ensures that in order to get that package to you today, we're not paying inflated vendor costs like with UPS or with FedEx or in my experience with a lot of Royal Mail and on the English side, they have cutoffs that we have to get to. They'll take a package late, fine, but they're gonna upcharge that amount for them to then speed up how it gets to you. So staying tight to these processes is a really big deal, and making sure that we're able to adapt very quickly. And I think that that's a key that's often missed with giant corps, and something that I learned and saw that's still scalable at Amazon. When there's a snafu, whatever it is, and there always will be, right? That's why there's managers, is to work through these snafus. We have to be able to flex and flex quickly so that we can get back on track and move forward. You got to take learnings from those snafus, whatever that is, take learnings from those corrections and put in some sustainment procedures to make sure that hopefully that doesn't happen again. And when we talk about at speed, Dr. Weinstein, you know, my building was responsible for shipping in excess of 20,000 packages an hour, 22 hours a day. So when something falls off, when something isn't working just right, the impact can grow almost like you can't imagine. I mean, it's incredible how a backlog can grow when there's issues at that speed.
I am sure you've seen it, but the I Love Lucy chocolate factory assembly line video, you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh, I have to send you the link.
Okay. Send that.
All right. So basically, what you're talking about is the fact that the speed of the assembly line, the speed with which things move, is timed down to the second to ensure you can deliver 22,000 packages per hour, 22 hours a day.
Yeah.
And if it slows down, you don't meet that target. If it speeds up, the likelihood of mistakes increases. And so that timing, those processes, the steps that are necessary are exquisitely timed out and practiced and rehearsed. In other words, you don't just hire somebody and throw them on the assembly line and expect them to deliver. I assume, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I have to assume that there is a training to the level of the processes and to a level of expertise so you can trust people to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's not it's not simple, right? It's complex, even how not unlike how medicine's complex, which I don't know is not my expertise point, but I know is an expertise and is very complex, at least from my vantage point. And similarly with training, how Amazon trains, in what process, where that person can start. And trying to bring it back to veterinary as I know my audience a little bit here, but it's just like someone isn't going to jump into the most complex surgery that's just learning surgery. I'm sure there's an easier or a more standard or a more simple surgery to be done, and let's get this person working there. And it's that same kind of thing, just that growth up through is done at nearly every level.
So, a couple of quick questions on corporations, and then we'll move on. Were there things at either Bridgestone or Amazon that you saw that you want to avoid replicating or duplicating in your role within veterinary medicine? Were there some things that gave you a bad taste in any way, shape, or form that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I would say that I guess a simple one that I heard a long time ago from a leader I really respect is stupid rules for stupid reasons. And we can't have them. When corporations get really big and there can be some kind of bloating in the org chart almost. And what I mean by that is if you have extra leadership, extra silos, extra departments, there can be uh, a type of work that begins that's kind of that builds their job, that creates a job for themselves. And when you look at it, you have to ask yourself, uh, and I've trained this a lot, to be honest with you, is this good for the customer? Is this good for the employee? And is this good for the business? And if we're able to answer yes to all three of those questions, there's a good chance that it's something we want to look at, that it might be worth going toward. But if you look at it and you're saying no about your customer, your client, your patient in the vet world, right? If you're saying no about your teammate, your employee, however we're looking at that associate, or certainly if you're saying no for the business and it's going to start tanking money, or it's not bringing in profitability, or it's not improving your go to market, then that's an issue as well.
So let's talk veterinary medicine. Until 8 months ago or so, you are a consumer of veterinary services, but you do understand the client experience and you understand the human animal bond. You've kind of, through Gwen Lauder, who runs the company, you've gotten a fire hose education in veterinary businesses, veterinary practices, and you've worked with both corporate and independent practices. Now that you've got a little bit more of an insider view, what do you see as some of the issues in veterinary practices, kind of a new kid on the block who finally got to look behind the curtain and see that, the Wizard of Oz?
Yeah. So my answer here is really twofold. So for one, what I work with directly now, working with veterinary industry recruiting, is working with hiring processes, best practices, how many interviews, all the nitty gritty of hiring, and then a little bit that I see directly, but granted not as much because I'm not the mentee, I'm not the one there. Is what is the candidate going to go through for an onboarding process? And that's, again, I'm still kind of blind to that because I can only hear that third person. I don't get to see that firsthand. And the variation, in going back to what I deal with directly, which is hiring processes, the variation across clients of mine, clients of VetPro Central, is incredible. Whether it's fly out and stay for, come in for 2 weeks and do like a locum or like a 2 week kind of paid practice there, or a chat on the phone, or a paneled interview where it just varies wildly. I could go on and on about the different ways that candidates are being interviewed across veterinary practices, but it's honestly, it was shocking to me. I was very surprised by all the different options and the different ways that especially a veterinary doctor may be interviewed by a practice.
I want you to think about that for a second, because what you just delineated is the fact that veterinary hospitals have no consistency in their hiring process. And go back to your Bridgestone and Amazon background, you talk about the processes that you had there from a hiring standpoint, but from an operational standpoint, and extrapolate the fact that if they don't have consistency in their hiring process, what do you think they have with respect to consistency in client service, in patient care, and other things? And so what I think you are seeing in the tip of the iceberg is one area of practices that lack consistency, and it reflects back on many other areas in practice that lack consistency that you, as a consumer of veterinary services, experience in the front desk area or the exam rooms or things of that nature.
Sure. And really, and not to cut you off in any way here, but kind of that second part is the interviewing that I've done of veterinary managers, veterinarians, and not interviewing these, but the practice owners, speaking with them, working with clients and working with administrators and what have you. And they have questions and concerns, especially veterinary doctors, veterinarians have questions and concerns around the processes at this prospective new hospital that they may be going to.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I won't share here to protect the innocent, but you get a lot of stories about difference of client treatment, difference of how bookkeeping is done, who does the work after intake. The term, I think it's a bit of jargon, but of cutting your own cases will come up a lot. Is the surgery team there all boarded? When do we refer out? When don't we refer out? What is something that we can do at this hospital? What is something that we don't do here? And it goes to a specialty. All of these things are on the minds of the candidates that I've spoken with. And that's just the slice that I've gotten, but I don't doubt that mine is unique.
It's interesting because you've worked both with corporate and private practices. Do you find that there is more consistency within a family of corporate practices? We're not talking about, corporate A versus corporate B, but within corporate A, is it more predictable within one corporation if you're working with different regional managers or vice presidents or whomever you work with on the corporate side? Is there consistency within that group when it comes down to the hiring process, or within the practices?
Contrary to what logic would say, I would say no. With the most consistency that I've seen has been with independent owners, and granted, in almost 100% of the cases, if not 100%, these are doctor owners of multiple practices. So say they have, so this isn't a big corporate by any means, but let's not kid ourselves. This is not a small business either. 7, 8, 10, 15 locations that started as one, however many years ago, and grew to this through a doctor owner. Those I have seen real consistency from. As far as corporate ownership, in a lot of these cases, oftentimes even the the vet practice's name isn't kept the same. It varies by region or what have you, and I don't see consistency in those necessarily.
I jest, and a couple of things with respect to consistency. I would suggest that the only thing consistent in veterinary medicine is its inconsistency between practice to practice. And so, you talk about onboarding and orientation, you talk about mentoring. Wouldn't it be nice if there were some consistent ways that most practices do things? But I am sure that you have asked practice that you're hiring for, tell me about your onboarding and orientation program. And they'll say, what's that?
Yeah, it's usually not what's that, but for all intents and purposes, it may be just about that. So I guess for me, if with it being different clients and different businesses, I think that having some consistency across an industry is definitely important, no doubt. But a individual, a small practice can and do come up with great mentoring programs and all of that, and they can really work, especially when they're done by the person who came up with them, and it's that smaller kind of setup. Where I see the variation and where there's concern is the lack of scalability, and it's how are you going to train, or how is this person going to train the next person to do this? How much tribal knowledge is locked up in a veterinary practice that has a staff where the least tenured person has been there 12 years? And then what happens when one of those heavily tenured, heavily tribal knowledge people leaves? You have a massive hole if you haven't created a written process, taught this to other people, ensured sustainment, and yeah, and the likes with that. Get it on paper.
Oh, dude, I'd love to give you a hug. I have to send you a copy of my book so you can read about it, at least the stuff that I've written about it. So, it's interesting. You talk about tribal knowledge on one hand. On the other hand, the way most training is done in veterinary hospitals is the game of telephone. You may remember the game of telephone growing up.
I do.
All right. Well, that's how most training is done in veterinary hospitals, which means by the time you get to two or three generations, it's nowhere near the way it was supposed to be when it initially got started. So the creation of processes and having systems and having documentation of how you want things done, whether it's the hiring process or just the way the phone is answered, is foundational. But we're not there yet in veterinary medicine because we're not Amazon and Bridgestone. We're not even there yet at the corporate level of veterinary medicine from that standpoint. So I want to talk about something that is a weakness, among others, that veterinarians could do better. And you mentioned that you had done 1,200 or more interviews. The interviewing process is a combination of art and science. And I can't tell you how many people I interviewed for positions when I was in practice or even in other roles. And I found myself way too often talking too much. I felt I was doing a sales job to the interviewee in contrast to letting them do a sales job to me. So talk to me about the art and science of interviewing, because you have probably interviewed more people than 98% of the veterinary profession.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, my history with Amazon, there's several hundred there, and then really with Bridgestone, being responsible for that market in DFW, recruiting was a huge part of it. People are moving, people's lives are changing, and I had to make sure that I had a leadership team in. So it did involve many interview. What I've spoken about recently, even to veterinary practice management groups, is around behavioral situational interviewing. And this is not a practice that is unique to Amazon, Google, Bridgestone, or what have you. You can read about it at length, but making sure that we're conversational, like you and I have been even today, that there's good back and forth, and then learning about what someone has done in experiences like they will likely have in your, like in this job for them. Let's find out about how they behaved in actuality in the past in similar experiences. And when you ask people about that, not only is it interesting and engaging for both parties, which is important, right, to make sure that we have that conversational piece, but also we know that how they behaved then, there is a strong likelihood that their behavior will continue near or about what that behavior was in the future. So understanding people's experiences down to the details is very important. And I think it's often missed where we don't get down to the detail as well. And the how is so important. And I hear that from candidates as well, right? The how a senior doctor might speak with a new grad, or how how is conflict resolved, where, when, all of these things are very big. So in interviewing, we want to get down to that detail as well. We want to understand, what did these meetings, what did this interaction look like? And that doesn't mean naming names or anything like that, right? But we still need to understand the interpersonal part of it, because I think that is what's often most missed.
Yeah, it's there's a song in Hamilton, "Talk less, smile more." I I think in veterinary medicine it would be talk less, listen more, and listen for stories. Also listen for pronouns. I find that sometimes interviewees who are a little bit egocentric use the term I when you're talking about working with a team instead of the word we. And since in veterinary medicine, we're always hiring to be a part of a team, how important is some of the use of pronouns and the stories that they tell regarding how they may be able to work with others?
Yeah, so I've talked about this a good bit. I've read about this, and it kind of, the I and we thing kind of dives into like the little, for lack of a better, like bag of tricks kind of thing that you can look for in an interview to kind of help decipher a direction. But then it's very, that bag of tricks is very muddled, because everyone's educated by the internet to either say I or we, or whichever one that they want to land on, or who says is best, or the advice that they've gotten. So what I would take you back to is the details. As an example, I've had plenty of interviewers talk about talking about big scope things, big projects, and they were the leader for it. But in the story, you'd think that it was a one team, a one person team.
Mm-hmm.
So then you got to dive deeper with the probing questions, right? Which is, can you tell me about your role? What was the day to day on that team? What did you do? You didn't build the software, certainly. Like, we know from the role title generally what they would have done, but then from there, understanding the detail that they know about the project is going to tell you how involved they were. So if we take that back to like a hospital administrator or something like that, or a leadership role in a veterinary practice, if that leader is able to tell me about how they added a wing onto the hospital, like they did a reno of the hospital, they wanted to add square footage and they needed a bigger boarding facility or what have you, right? And in order to do that, they said, I built this, I. Okay, well, what part did you actually do on a day-to-day basis? Their ability to tell you about the details of the project is going to tell you how involved they were quickly, very quickly. Because if they know what subcontractors, if they know what planning, if they know the numbers that they were planning on hitting, You talk about the success. Ask this person for this project that I've just figmented here. Was it successful? Oh yeah, it was wildly successful. Okay, well, what were the goals for success and how successful was it against those goals? Because oftentimes at the end of this, you might hear, oh, the hospital made $2 million more the next year. Well, how much did the expansion cost? Because if it was 4 mil, I don't think the ROI is looking good. Like we're hurting. So understanding the numbers will tell you more about how involved this person and how close to the detail they were. And lastly, what I'll say to that is that's how it's likely going to be for you with that person. So did they get deep enough into the detail, if you're the hiring manager, to be satisfactory as a lead on that project?
So 3 words I read in an article when you're doing an interview that can be very useful. And they tap right into what you're saying. The 3 words are tell me more.
Absolutely.
And really what you're trying to do is take that to really assess what their involvement was versus what they wanted their involvement to be. And so
exactly right.
There's a lot of stories out there, and we have a lot of people who can talk about what they've done technically, but the questions that really differentiate building a positive culture come from the behaviorally based questions in terms of dealing with difficult coworkers or difficult bosses or uncomfortable situations. Are there 1 or 2 behavioral questions that you liked to ask anytime you were doing an interview to just try to get a feeling for the person?
Yeah. So one that I've kind of brought to this and thought about, and I've definitely said hundreds of times, something around this exactly is, from reviewing your experience, as an example here, and quote from here, right? From reviewing your experience, I see you've worked with many team environments. Can you tell me about a time when you were working on a team and you didn't agree with the direction the team wanted to go? And from there, that question isn't so special. And you kind of got to it with the tell me more. It's the questions you ask with the question and how you draw out that story that is so important. So the follow-ups that I would automatically have for it was, how did you present your point of view? In the end, what direction was agreed upon? How did you ensure that the team knew you were on board? How did you ensure that there was buy-in from the team after changing the direction? So starting to dive in and really pull from this, and when you talk about the interpersonals and the behavioral and stuff like that, I can tell you right now, if it didn't go well for them and they didn't like it, you're going to have an opportunity to see how that person behaves and likely behaved in that situation, because it evokes emotion, doesn't it? If they're telling you about a story where it didn't go your way, or where you had to, bend the team back to the direction you wanted to go, there can be reactions there. And in personal experience, there can be visceral reactions from interviewees. And if you see that and you have concerns about what those reactions are, well, there's the writing on the wall.
You've probably done a lot of virtual interviews more recently, but hopefully you did a good number of face-to-face interviews in the past as well. How important is body language when it comes to the interview process?
I would say it's huge. And thanks to COVID, you're right. I've done tons and tons of virtual interviews, whether it be with phone only or audio only, with video, with technical issues throughout. And it's tough with body language there, because, and I think a lot of your listeners and a lot of your audience will be working with some video interviews and things like that. How you appear and how you bring your body language that may be so natural in real life can be really kind of goofy on a camera. whether or not you look super, are you leaned into it, are you having a hunch over a laptop, or whatever that ends up looking like, can really be really positive or not so positive, depending on how it is. And it absolutely impacts the interview, even with a video call. So in person, yeah, it's massive. Being able to make sure that the interviewee is comfortable is a big deal there, though, too. Because what can happen in a lot of situations, if you're having a candidate wait in your waiting room out front, especially in a veterinary hospital where we got dogs and animals and everything all abound, and they're out there for 15, 20 minutes, and we're bringing them in, and we're not offering them water, or we're not showing them, they don't know where the bathroom is, we're not going through the standard stuff. When you sit down for that interview, you might have someone that's really on guard, and that body language is going to reflect, and frankly, probably the answers are going to reflect. And now, because as an interviewer in this fictitious idea, you've set it up all difficult, now you're not going to get that true person self, and really get positive, or you've not set them up for success, I guess, to put it.
That's a great segue, because your job right now is a matchmaker. I did it for 2 years. I don't know if you knew that or not. I was a executive recruiter for 2 years. I helped hospitals find managers and doctors and managers find hospitals. It's interesting because you're trying to bring people together, sometimes who you've never physically met, by asking questions and putting together commonalities, one of which is obviously location and demographics, but other is, the job that they need to have filled. And of course, the hiring hospital wants you to guarantee the person, and the person wants you to guarantee the hospital. But you can only, it's like trying to figure out how to put two Lego pieces together that really aren't meant to go together, but sometimes they fit well. So it has got to be a challenge in this field, especially, to make these matches, because as we talked about, there's issues in terms of processes, there's issues in terms of orientation and onboarding, and to a degree, there's a failure to help by the practice to help somebody become successful. They really want to bring somebody on who can step in within the first 6 minutes and contribute. So I think I hear you laugh.
Yeah, I'm giggling. Yeah, it's true.
So
So true.
if you had to give a message to the veterinary hospitals who are hiring, and then the same question for the people looking for a job, what would you tell hiring hospitals that they really should think about doing to set up their new hire for success?
I think that making sure that, and it kind of goes back to where we were with it. If you're the proud leader of an organization, of a veterinary hospital, I have to imagine you have an expectation for what a hiring process should look like. When do we get back to people? When do we interview? That should be in writing. That should be memorialized, and that should be discussed with teams. And before it's memorialized, uh, it should be brainstormed, and we should go through a process to build that, and then follow it, and then the sustainment pieces come back and look at it again. Did it work? Maybe it was rubbish from the go, right? Maybe we had this best intention, it didn't really work that great. And then are we learning from outside sources? And then for the onboarding and the training, similarly, making sure that we put a lot of value in one-on-ones. And this is another whole basket for me of that I'm a huge proponent of, but making sure that we're having one-on-one conversations with this new person at the hospital after hire, obviously, with the HR leader there, with the senior veterinarian there, with the practice owner or VP or what have you, as it applies, and then we're sustaining that, because much like you and I have had a conversation before, Dr. Weinstein, this is not our first conversation ever, because the first conversations that you have with people are inherently going to be a bit kind of clunky, right? You might end up chatting for 25 minutes about the weather, and on both of your minds might be this big issue that you see at the hospital, but you're not sure if this is the right person to bring it to, or if this is actually a problem, or what have you. So having one-on-one safe conversations with leadership at the hospital with a fair amount of regularity, every 2-3 weeks, once a month. When you talk to people about it, it never happens. So any kind of quarterly, if we're coming from never, moving it to quarterly is pretty doable, I would say. So having those things in place is really big, and then practicing them, making sure that you value those and you keep those important.
There's a business principle that people who will do business with those that they know, like, and trust. And I talk about it from a marketing standpoint, but I would suggest it's even more important from a human resource standpoint. The first conversation is getting to know you. We did that a little while ago before we had this conversation. Today's conversation, maybe we did the know and like in that conversation, because you would not have done this podcast with me if you didn't trust me. And so I think really one of the principles of human resources is getting, and especially in a role like you have, is getting people to know, like, and trust you. And once you trust them and they trust you, business becomes so much easier from that standpoint. But it doesn't happen on the first date, and it doesn't happen on that first conversation. It takes time. And that's the difference, again, between a customer and a client. A customer is at the know stage. A client is moving from like to trust. And so I love your messaging from that standpoint of talking to one another. Tom Peters uses the MBWA, management by wandering about. Just go out and make a concerted effort to talk to your associates, talk to your technicians, talk to your managers from a leadership standpoint. And I want to just dive briefly into mentoring, and then we'll start to wrap things up. Mentoring to me is something that all new hires want. And if you read your classifieds, I'm sure, and the ones that are all over AVMA and other resources, everybody says they offer mentoring. It's gotten to a point that offering mentoring is like offering water. It sometimes has a taste to it, and sometimes it's pretty bland. How many of the practices that you work with offer mentoring with meat, and how much of the practices that you talk to just throw mentoring around as if it's a word, but they really don't understand it? You know what I'm getting at here. Is how real is the delivery of mentoring in the practices that you work with?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and kind of a tough one, because like I've said, in my current role, I'm at least one full level of separation away from that. Mm-hmm. It's not something that I would naturally get to hear about, except from the person who is purporting that they're doing the mentoring. I'm kind of only receiving it from the one side before it happens, and then I don't really get a lot of reporting back. The other thing that really complicates it is mentoring's a broad brush.
Yep.
A very broad brush. So people's expectation of what a mentor does for a mentee runs the absolute gamut. And kind of as it should, because I've had mentors from other business units, from other companies, in different stages of their life, like so separated from me that I felt like we're still great mentors about various things that I was working with at the time. But I've also had mentors that are I'm basically shadowing, where you're right there with them, and it's step by step, maybe the early stages of some new roles. So that's kind of the tough part of it. And I guess the last part that I would say is, especially with the more hands-on and the more close-knit, it's the who's doing it. And I'll drum it one more time, but it's like it's how processes can not be so robust and still be very successful is with, say, an operating doctor like yourself on a pet. You may not have the best list of what to do in a surgery that Dr. Weinstein, you've done 1,000 times. Well, that's okay, because that list is already in your head. You're good. So if the process has some gaps, you'll naturally fill them and execute well. But a new person may not. So going back to it, it's the who's mentoring. Has this person mentored a lot of people? Has this person grown a lot of veterinarians in their life? Has this person dealt with these situations many, many times and is eloquent and professional at handling it? Or have they been instructed by a regional hospital administrator, or regional VP, what have you, to go be a mentor for these 3 people at X hospital? Because then I have real concerns, because all those positives of what I've made the example of you about may and likely don't apply.
All right, a couple of questions, we'll wrap it up. So you said to me on our pre-call that you were surprised by the number of veterinarians that work as locums. Why did this surprise you?
So the biggest surprise to it for me was how much I value, it's quite personal, really. It's how much I value having the same veterinarian for my dogs at a practice. And does that mean that if, God forbid, they get bit, in Southern California, if they get bit by a snake or something like that, that I expect that doctor's waiting at the hospital 24/7? No, absolutely not. I get that a hospital needs to run how it needs to run. But at the same time, much like my own physician, I, for human, I take comfort in going back and seeing the same person for a regular checkup. And I believe that our pets do as well. I think that it's important that there's some regularity and there's a relationship built. So is that possible with locum? Yes, probably, if it's really well executed and robust. But I would say it's probably not likely. In a lot of cases, and what experiences I've had with more corporate veterinary hospitals that I've brought my pets to, it's been a different doctor every time. They're not even sure where that doctor is now that's left or that's come back, or any of this movement. They may not be in for 3 weeks. Whatever the story is, it just is kind of tough. So to see so much of it going on was really surprising to me.
Understood. Some of it is money, some of it's lifestyle, some of it is work-life balance. As you probably noticed, 80% of the veterinary students coming out of school are women, 65% of the small animal clinicians are women. And so some of this locum is a lifestyle family type discussion, and be interesting to get on a call. And I've done this because I've talked to a lot of people who help with locums about the reasons why they've decided to become a relief doctor or per diem or a locum. You mentioned this earlier, but I want to reiterate it. The fact that you worked for over a decade in a large corporate environment with all of its benefits, and now you've left and entered the veterinary medical field, a totally foreign field except as a consumer. You're on the other side of the door. Talk to me about the change and how has it changed you now that you're doing something that in our prior conversation you said you're now passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. So it comes from the final eventuality of what's brought me here, and why I feel so good about it now is, throughout my career, throughout my life, I've found enjoyment in helping people, and whether that be with business acumen at automotive shops, or with leaders in a fulfillment center, or the various jobs that I have, the people to people is really big for me. And I have this opportunity right now that I'm in with veterinary to be a part of a very caring community that really does an essential service that I value, that I cherish. And I've kind of found my way to be the most helpful that I can, right? Like, I'm not going to go become a veterinarian tomorrow. Like I'm not at the stage, it's not going to work for me, and it's not it. But wanting to get into vet med and wanting to be a part of this industry has been important to me because of what it stands for, because of the community help, because of the locality of so much of it. And that's not always true, but with local hospitals and things like that, the give back to the community around, people that don't necessarily have access to pets, let alone pet care, and what that looks like, and quality healthcare for their pets, is really fulfilling. And what I've found from having dogs my whole life is been incredible. So I think that kind of sums it up.
Well, I was going to ask you whether it's harder to work with veterinarians or run an Ironman, but I think we won't answer that question.
Okay, fair enough. Neither are easy.
Let's wrap it up. From your Amazon and Bridgestone experiences, from this big business, multi-billion-dollar business, to veterinary experiences, what message would you leave to the veterinary listeners, managers, owners, associates who might be looking about building a successful team that stays together and plays together?
Yeah, thank you for that. And what I would say is, to put it short, it's continuous improvement that involves the entire team. I've seen great success and great growth out of people and teams that come together and say, hey, here are the areas that we should be better in, or we want to be better in. Let's talk about how we do that. What are we doing now that isn't making our goal to serve clients better, to whatever it is, right? What are we doing now that is inhibiting that? What can we do more to improve that? And involving the entire team, having to talk about it. Like, there's all the fluff that you can do with Kaizens and all the different things and names and processes for it. And that's great. You can follow those. Many of those are wonderful. Six Sigma, all of that. But ultimately, and very simply, continuously improving your business and how you go to market, and involving the entire team with that improvement is huge. And great processes will come with it, come out of it. And to your point, with the team that plays together, you should have fun with these things. Whether or not you do continuous improvement or Kaizens or things like that off-site, or you make things fun, even though it's still work, try to add some of that fun in, right? I mean, ultimately are still all at work, so we're not going to pretend like it's a vacation, but involving the team is big for your process improvements.
Ryan, I'm sure we could go on and on because I'm having so much fun, but with all due respect to your time, I'm going to suggest this is a great place to wrap things up. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me today. Thanks to talking to us about what veterinary medicine can learn from Amazon and Bridgestone. And we appreciate it so much. I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We can't do this without you. If you like our podcast, kindly share it with your colleagues and friends on social media. Also, please don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Until next time, keep striving for excellence and making a positive impact in the lives of our patients and pet parents. Ryan, thank you again. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dr. Weinstein. It was absolutely a pleasure.
Want to wish everybody an amazing week ahead.